Hello, my name is Gabby Richardson, and you are listening to The Nexus of Narratives, where we use stories to bring people together across belief systems. New episodes are released every Monday on your favorite podcast platform, where I have a conversation with a guest about an obstacle that they faced in their life that invited them to take a look at their beliefs, whether about themselves or about the world around them. We talk about how those beliefs were formed and how formative moments shape how we interact with the world. The Nexus of Narratives is what we will uncover through this story exploration. It's the common thread that unites all of us, no matter what our beliefs are. If you are an avid podcast listener, you know the deal. Please take a moment on the platform where you are listening to rate, follow, and review. Those little acts go a long way in ensuring that this important work reaches more people. Instead of doom scrolling on social media, follow the Nexus of Narratives to add some connection to your social feed. Check the show notes for links to follow the Nexus of Narratives on social media, access bonus content on Patreon, connect with me, connect with today's guest, and see any content warnings. All right, enjoy this story. So to start off the new year, and which I feel like I've been saying Happy New Year for an eternity now.
I can't believe it's 2025.
Yeah.
I can't. It's great.
Fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
So with a new year and new microphones, we thought it would be a wonderful idea to start off by recreating the context and reminding the context of the Nexus of Narratives, and actually taking a moment to share why we feel like it's important and why it's something that's really deeply important to me now that we have some really cool stories.
Yeah, there's some awesome stories.
Really
We're going to season 3.
So bananas.
Yeah.
Past Gabby was just like, no, you're not starting a podcast. And then Gabby right now is like, past Gabby. You're silly.
Pass around like you're not going on a podcast.
Much less kind of being this co-host behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes person. Yes.
Yeah. Oh no.
Put yourself out there.
Okay.
Cameras are scary. Mm-hmm. It's good to face your fears.
Mm-hmm. It's literally an iPhone. Even though there are these studio light kind of things.
I know there is. It feels legit.
So to kind of reintroduce this context, something that we were talking about that would be really wonderful to put out and share is kind of why narrative.
Yeah.
And I touched on the purpose of the podcast and different stories, different episodes, different, I did a little about video or things like that. And we shared some of this context around narrative in an episode with Shantae that's on Patreon for anyone who's not a Patreon member.
Fun episode. She's amazing.
She is incredible. Yeah.
She's incredible.
And so thought what a wonderful way to start off the new year with new and enhanced sound to reintroduce this. So for me, I wanted to just kind of start with why narrative started to unfold for me as something that's powerful and important and can be a force for positive transformation, not only in individuals, but within systems and communities and groups. And so to make what could be a tremendously long story short is in my past position, I was supporting in creating a Healthy Communities Initiative. And so we called it the Healthy Parkinson's Communities Initiative. And as I was supporting this initiative being thought up and designed and programs being created or redesigned to be a part of this, I was building relationships with an organization called Healthy Places by Design. And overall, as an organization, we had decided, it doesn't make sense to just focus on Parkinson's. The organization was focused on Parkinson's, but you really can't have a healthy Parkinson's community without having a healthier community for the aging adult population in general. Mm-hmm. And so I was building these relationships and was invited, but through Healthy Places by Design, to be a part of a group that was working together to build transformative narratives. And they had already had a cohort before, and this was the second cohort to come together we were being trained to facilitate our own cohorts on leading transformative narratives. And part of this was digging into and learning the power of narrative. And those of us who were on the Zoom screen, because I think this was like 2021 or 2022. So all of the humans on boxes of the screen, we were all engaging in some sort of systems or social change activities, whether directly related to or kind of tangentially, which I felt like I was a little more on the tangential side. And it was me who was going to be working with a group of people living with Parkinson's who were committed to building more equitable outcomes for health, because for them, it's about access to specialized healthcare to get a Parkinson's diagnosis. It was about Parkinson's awareness, because to make a really long story short for them is we were working on ensuring that Parkinson's wasn't just understood as this old shaky white guy's disease. Yeah. Because Parkinson's affects everybody equally. It does not discriminate, but what does discriminate is access to healthcare. Yep. and those systems. So that was what this group was really committed to. So then I would be facilitating this group to say, okay, so from the Parkinson's lens, how do we start to transform narratives? And this group was specifically focused on health equity. And I was the only person there who was going to be working directly with people of a specific disease state. Everyone else that was in the room, they were social justice advocates. They were people who had their own consulting businesses to help companies be more socially minded and come from an anti-racist perspective, and working on building up our systems. Like, these people were directly in that. So I was like, whoa, I felt so much imposter syndrome, but like in the most wonderful way. I was like, I have so much to learn from these folks.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
And the spicy conversations that came up and the passion, I was like, wow. I learned so much in so many ways, which could be a whole nother story of itself. Because I felt like
amazing.
That completely transformed me. And on the first session to train to be a facilitator of this group, they talked about the power of narrative, and they had explained how when working in spaces where we are taking on a role that we want to see something different, we want to be a part of a different system, we want our systems to work for people differently. Mm-hmm. It starts with communicating about the system in a way that it's communicated as changeable. Mm-hmm. And the belief is and was in that context that so long as we communicate that our systems are not changeable, people will not believe they're changeable, and then they won't take initiative to change them. So how do we start creating narratives that communicate our systems as changeable as the first step in the longest long game to create better systems for everybody, rather than just some people, which is how it feels. And so it was like the most beautiful start to a long game that I even knew could exist. And It rocked my world to know, oh, the words that we use can be uplifting. They can inspire change. They can motivate people. They can drive groups to do incredible things. Mm-hmm. Or our words and these underlying narratives can be things that people feel paralyzed by. Yeah. So then as I was starting to work in this and see the power of it, and it was so incredible, so tremendous. It's just understanding narrative and starting to dip my toe into working in that, I feel really rocked my world in how I can be a force of good for people. Yeah. And so then as I was starting to think about how do I want to take my impact into a greater scale, was starting to think about the social context that I'm experiencing of divisiveness across beliefs, contention across beliefs, whether it's difference in political views or social views or beliefs of how different groups should operate and behave. For me, when I was picturing it, was like so much division across beliefs. And then when I would listen to people, I was like, I actually think what I'm hearing is that people want similar things, just in a different way, and just like disagreeing on what the solution is. And what I was seeing as like common threads of whether like people did really wonderful things or really terrible things were around like belonging and acceptance and what beliefs came from the stories that they had developed about themselves and their lives. And like, I just saw this like really big thing happening. And I was like, okay, so how can I be a person who like has the limited influence that I do and the limited scope that I do to do what I can to try to bring all of these like really big things together in a way that feels purposeful for me. And so then I started thinking about, what if I could work with people to share their stories, and then people listening and experiencing that could go, oh, I didn't know that it was like that for those people, and start to like open their context of understanding of what the world is like by listening to other experiences and kind of witnessing what it's like to have a conversation with someone who has beliefs that you may or may not agree with, and create a greater context for how people operate. So then maybe we can have some more compassionate connection in time. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was thinking like, it's called Nexus of Narratives. Mm-hmm. We tell a lot of stories. So how is like a story? Is a narrative and a story the same thing? Or how are we pulling out? Could you like touch a little bit more on that? Yeah. About how like pulling out narratives and discussing narratives within stories and how that's kind of being broadcasted on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nexus of Narratives being like the intersection of narratives. And because I believe that there is that intersection. And so kind of what I'm hearing is like the difference, and we talked a little bit about it, is like, what's the difference between narrative and story? And so like narrative is the overall theme, the way that a story is told, and that overall underlying driving context of it. Whereas the story itself is the sequence of events. And so the narrative could be like the series of beliefs, the ecosystem of beliefs and thoughts and experiences that then drive how that story takes place. Transforms. And so I like narrative because it's bigger. It's more broad. It's what's underlying. And the stories illuminate what those greater narratives are. So through listening to different people's stories, we can start to understand, okay, what are the common threads in this person's set of stories, in this series of stories of this person, which is part of what I think is cool about, and I didn't expect to come out of the episodes, is initially I was expecting it to be like one story from a person's life that we ended up then like digesting and diving into. Yeah, like where did this come from? Where is it going? Like how has this shaped you? Yeah. And it's turned into, and I think most people who have been on the podcast have actually shared a sequence of stories, almost in a timeline of their life, whether they choose to like focus on a theme of a of stories throughout their life, or say like, I was born here in this context and this is what's happened since.
Yeah, that's true. I can see that.
And so I think it's been cool that didn't go how I was originally expecting.
Yeah.
And
such as projects normally do, like evolve into what they must be.
And I'd be sitting there with a person and I'm like, this is not what I was expecting, but I think that's what's so cool about this. And then there's some people that I'm like, I feel like it's really important for your experience that I hold space for you, rather than be like, this is the podcast and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what has been some of the most beautiful stories that have come up throughout this journey so far. And I love how it has been something where people are like, okay, so here's where it all started.
This is what it came from.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how it jumped and evolved.
Mm-hmm. And here are the common threads. Here are all of these different stories, and where, like, as a storyteller, I hear people say, here are all these different stories and where I see the common thread.
Yeah.
And then I, as a listener, I'm like, cool. Here's some other common threads that I see. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah.
And to approach conversations about the humanity of people in a curious and playful and like loving and compassionate way has been so magical for me. But then also I can see it in the people that I talk to. I've had so many people that I've done episodes with that they're like, have other people told you like how good they feel after just like sharing all of this? And I'm like, good. And like the first time I heard that, I was like, I'm so happy you had that experience. I didn't expect that. Like, what a wonderful like side effect, right?
Yeah.
And then after I got it like at least 5 times, I was like, yeah, I am getting that a lot, actually.
Actually, this is a common thread. Giving space for people to open up about their experiences with no shame, I think also allows for deeper insight, because we all have our stories and we all have like pretty strong narratives and beliefs, and I think a lot of them can be really harmful in the society that we're in and such. So I'm not surprised that they all feel so much more like lighter almost and better. And that's like a really awesome gift.
I almost think like what I just kind of clicked connecting when you were saying that is, and this is what I heard and sort of made up in what you were saying, because I'm having it fit my own context, is like,
okay, let's go.
Are we going to do, did I hear you right or no?
Narratives.
What I heard is, we're living in a world where it's not safe, or people don't feel safe really expressing who they are on a deep and authentic level. Yeah. So when there is a context and a space that is created that people feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel accepted no matter what, then at the end of that, the experience is, yeah, that felt great.
Yeah.
Because like maybe that was like one of very few times that that person could feel safe being authentic, as opposed to being in spaces where there isn't a sense of feeling safe and being like tense of like, is it okay for me to be me here? Yeah.
I feel like that's a narrative that I feel like a lot, if not everyone, at least in some space in their life, carries. And then for some of us, I think it's a lot more of a prevalent narrative. Think about like neurodiversity and I think about just all the different types. I've read so many books, I feel like, from people with different types of stigmatized mental health issues, quote unquote, or just mental health ways or states of being that leads them to just feel like they can't be them, or they can't even have the the ups and downs. They can't even ask for help. Like they're just like stuck in their brain or in their state because, you know, I want to specifically say like our healthcare system, because that's where I've had the most experience, especially as a professional, where it's just like, oh, we have to like medicate and like the things you're thinking or the things you're feeling. No, like we can't go there. We have to like lock it down and cure it. And it's like, but what if we got to that base narrative? And they talk a lot about that, I think, in it's called narrative therapy, actually. They have like a specific branch of narrative therapy and how people talk to themselves and talk about their world and their beliefs and thoughts, like you were saying.
Cool. So, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. Could look that up. But yeah.
The next book that I'll listen to.
Yeah. I don't have a book recommendation on that. I'm like right now reading Unmasking Autism, and like that book is amazing, and I cannot remember the author right now. It's an amazing book, and it really talks about some of the intense masks that we put, like people put on themselves, but specifically in the context of autism and its various ways of presenting and showing itself. But I think that can be done talked about for so many different communities, even just like marginalized communities from all different social contexts.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Like no matter what the social context is, there's something.
But I think the beauty here is that we strive to have so many people from so many different backgrounds who are at so many different stages in their lives with different experiences. And I mean, there are some people that I listen to and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like we have nothing, like there's like very little overlap, but yet I still see you and I can see what you're going through and like, look where you're at now. And then there's some people where I'm like, oh my gosh, too close. This is like, I feel so seen from my like couch with my headphones on, like, you know, and that whole experience is really beautiful in and of itself, because then you start thinking about your own stories and your own narratives and like how and why is this so triggering, or why is my body like this? I'm like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, okay, we're going to have a deep check in here. Rowan, what's happening? It's beautiful in that sense. And I'm so grateful to every person who's been here for that. And like their vulnerability and bravery and courage and amazingness to just be them.
Yeah. And like be okay with it being out there.
Yeah.
In the ethers.
Yeah.
With all of the unknown that I have. Of this too, is like, because I've gotten questions, okay, how many people listen, how many this, and I was like, okay, this is where we're at now, but I mean, I have high hopes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of uncertainty.
High hopes for what is that song? Sorry. Having a song moment.
And it actually makes me think of also for anybody listening, that it's okay if you're listening and you can't find that compassion in that moment. Like being human is having moments where you can feel and lean into that compassion. And then there's also moments where it's a lot harder for whatever reason, because of whatever system is going on, whatever narrative's playing in your own mind or my own mind. And those moments where you're like you're talking about like being clammed up and you're like, oh, why am I so tense right now? And we've had those where we talk about like people need to take those moments to take care of themselves too. And like having that boundary and that's okay.
Yeah.
To like not be available all the time for compassion and openness, and to find that dance for you, because as you were sharing that, it's different from what you were saying, but it reminded me as I've been coaching a group of people, and they're working on achieving goals and overcoming some of their own, you know, personal hurdles in life. And one of the people that I was coaching was in a really rough place and was sharing frustration and was like very passionately frustrated and in a like, oh, well, if you can do so good, then you do this kind of a place. And I was like, I totally see that and I hear it. And what if we approach from a place of like, hey, when we were on the meeting yesterday, I heard a lot of fear.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're really scared. I see you. So how can we all come together better? How can we all work together? Because I'm also afraid.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I don't have the capacity to do that right now. And I was like, that's okay. It's just what environment do you want to create is the reflection that I offered. It's like, what is your intention going into a space of what you want to create? And if you say, I don't have the capacity to create that right now, then come back later.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's also okay, like, if you blow up and then you're like, dang it, I need to come back and, like, massage this a bit. Like, that's also part of the human experience. Because we're not always our best selves. We're not always our most compassionate selves. We're not always, like, in the best place to listen with an open heart and an open mind. And that's the beauty of a podcast, is you can click pause. It's the easiest way to practice boundaries.
Yes. Compassionate boundaries. Because sometimes you just, the compassionate act is knowing when to stop and when you're not going to be available. And there's different ways to hone that muscle. I feel like I don't always view taking a moment for yourself or being like, this is too much for me, or like any of those kind of hard stops as lacking compassion. I view them as just a different kind of compassion, where you're taking care of yourself, but you're also thinking about the other person, because you want to be able to show up for that person, or you want to be able to take care of yourself so that you're able to kind of have that ripple out effect of just, okay, I'm more grounded so I can offer this grounded space to you. And sometimes for some people, that is like, I need to spend my hour lunch on my own next to a tree with no one talking to me. And like, I know everyone needs me, but like, I can't be here for you. And that to me is it dispassionate? It's not lacking compassion. It's just a different flavor.
I love that. And if people can then take that and see, oh, if someone holds a boundary, it's not them refusing to see me. It's not them pushing me away. Maybe it's them finding a moment where they can be more present with you in the future.
Yeah.
And yeah, what a beautiful way to put that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
So I think we committed to about 30 minutes here. So we're getting there. And man, we crushed it. I think that's such a beautiful spot to wrap this up. And this is going to be a really great season for so many reasons. And I'm excited.
The microphones as well will add to it.
Thank goodness.
Oh my goodness.
The lesson I had to learn the hard way too many times. Too many times. And I was actually speaking with, so for anyone who's listened to season 1 and seen the studio set up there, the dance studio turned podcast recording space where I had folks come in, and I was working with my friend who has a media production company, and then schedules got challenging to overlap to make it work consistently. And I was talking to him yesterday because we're talking about podcast recording spaces and a few other things. And I was explaining, I was like, dude, I learned the microphone thing again and again and again. And I thought I did my due diligence. I thought I did great research. I thought I asked the right questions. I thought I looked on the right forums. Yeah. I thought I read the right reviews. And so it was just like really illuminating for me of like, it's okay. He was like, yeah, it's not as intuitive as you'd think it is. People make it seem really easy. And then they're like, no, this is the product. And you get that product. And then, but it's the other thing. And so we're finally here.
That in of itself is a beautiful part of Nexus of Narratives, is just that is like the authenticity of kind of moving through and learning a new art I mean, I have so much respect. And yes, we keep talking about the microphones, but also the people who come on here are so amazing and so grateful to have them.
Yeah.
Microphone or not. That's like
yeah.
a huge part of it as well. And we have some awesome new episodes and new people, and it's just going to keep growing. And I'm hoping that we can just like that high hopes that every story keeps building that community, whether it's like completely intermeshed, if you're like a part of our Patreon, if we're wanting to reach out more, or if you're like, this one episode really changed me. That's the point of like just reaching out and creating these intersections. And I'm just really grateful to these people who, I mean, yeah, like I'm just co-hosting in a way that like I watch these people and I'm just like, you're so amazing. And like, oh my gosh. And like when I'm like editing or watching their things, I'm like, oh my gosh. Yes. I just want to hug you.
And I'm the lucky one who gets to.
I know. Like from the back, I'm like, yes.
I mean, yes. And thank you for like reiterating that. Is like really the people have been so incredible. And I'm so deeply grateful for their generosity with themselves to expose those tender parts of themselves for this thing that I've, shared that they also feel is important. And to have that shared passion to where then people come in and sometimes share some of their greatest pains and greatest joys is such an honor for me. And I don't take that lightly and I don't take it for granted. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Wow, what a tremendous conversation that was. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you were able to find just as many nuggets of wisdom as well as actionable steps to create connection in the spaces all around you. This is an extremely grassroots production, so thank you to my dear friend Rowan for their commitment to this work in supporting leading fantastic conversations on Patreon and so much more. So be sure to join that Patreon community to enjoy the additional content. And thank you so much to my sweet and talented husband, DJ, for editing the audio and creating the music that is used in this podcast. And of course, it almost feels like it goes without saying thank you to every single listener. Thank you to every single guest who has committed their time and energy to support what I feel is such important work in bringing people together and creating connection.